Well, good morning and welcome to you all to this session that we are going to start. A bit delayed in terms of time, but we are going to tackle the important issue of job quality.
Vamos a hablar acerca del asunto importante que tiene que ver con la calidad del trabajo.
A OSD y a INEGI por habernos invitado a moderar este panel. Mi nombre es Rafael Díez de Medina y soy el jefe de estadística y el director del Departamento de Estadística de la OIT en Ginebra. Y me encuentro muy honrado de estar hoy con ustedes moderando este panel sobre un tema que obviamente me toca de cerca. Well, I will turn to English to keep on as an introduction for the panel. And of course, the topic that we are going to tackle, it's a crucial component of well-being, as we all would agree, and that's the reason why we are all here. We have heard yesterday and also today from Professor Stiglitz's lecture that how important it is to properly measure key aspects of well-being for sound policy making, and how important it is to think out of the box and address key qualitative and quantitative aspects and dimensions of the main aspects of life. Nobody can deny that work as such occupies a central stage position in households and personal well-being. Earnings from work, and in particular from employment relationships, generate an important share of national income. Figures on creation and destructions of jobs are impatiently waited by policymakers, central banks, stock exchanges, press, media. Politicians are elected after promising jobs and better jobs. But what about the public? The public. This is usually seldom followed. There are many debates on how best to address this issue, trade-offs between job creations at all costs or generating quality jobs. Public expects to have jobs, but one wonders when walking in many developing countries' streets if all types of jobs really generate adequate well-being, or we should also focus on jobs, how jobs meet minimum quality standards and what makes a job decent. We have heard today important issues about how productivity and wages move. We've just heard Professor Stiglitz on this. We know that the role of corporate social responsibility and how private sector works to increase labor conditions and enhance labor conditions at the workplace to foster happiness are, of course, important issues around the quality aspects of work. We also have seen lately that the world has recently agreed on the 2030 Development Agenda, where there is a dedicated goal, the 8th one, that it mentions that explicitly decent work and growth. So there is a worldwide commitment to achieve this. Therefore, addressing the concept of quality of jobs is something that poses the challenges of having metrics to better capture all dimensions of what makes a job of quality or a job decent. And as this is a universal and wide agenda, we have also to focus both for the developed and the developing world. So today, for that, we have an impressive panel to help us understand these points. And I'm sure that we are going to have a lot of discussions and very important issues raised. And of course, I hope that it will trigger interesting comments and reactions from the floor. And that's the reason why I think it's very encouraging to have our 4 members of the panels that I am honored to moderate. We are going to be quite strict in the time, so we have agreed beforehand not to be nasty between ourselves. So we are going to, because we all want to have the opportunity to have your reactions, your questions from the floor, so we will stick quite strictly to the timing. Let me introduce first the four of them, so that afterwards I will introduce in the same order that we have agreed that the presentations will be having. We have Sandrine Cases, the senior economist at the OECD Statistics Directorate, who will be addressing firstly. Secondly, we will have Sang-Hyun Lee, who is a special advisor to the ILO Deputy Director General for Policies on economic and social issues. Then to my left, I have Kjeld Andersen from Land and Spar Bank in Denmark. Kjeld is Executive Vice President in the bank and have the responsibility for human resources and communication. And then, lastly, but not least, we have Oriane Tickle, with a master in applied positive psychology, who is the global partner of the Eye Opener Institute based in Oxford, founding partner of Corpex Coach Mexico, former president of the Mexico chapter of the International Coaching Federation, and has lived in Mexico for 25 years now, and now is in the UK. So with this impressive panel, we are going to start for the first presentation. Sandrine, you have the floor. Thanks.
So thanks, Raphael. Good morning. So what I would like to do this morning is to give you a flavor of the work we've been conducting recently at the OECD on job quality. I have to say I have quite a few slides, so in order to keep the time limit, I'm going to go pretty fast on some of those and try to flag the main points I would like to make this morning. So the notion of job quality is attracting much policy interest, as recently highlighted in the G20 Labour Ministerial meeting in Ankara last September, where Labour ministers stated that it's critical for policy action to focus not only on how many jobs are created in an economy, but also on how good those jobs are. So various initiatives, international initiatives in particular, have been undertaken over the last decade to develop conceptual and statistical framework to measure and assess job quality. The ILO, for instance, the UNEC or Eurofound, just to quote the most important ones. So to respond to this policy demand, the OECD has also engaged into a new project on job quality, which aims at bringing job quality to the policy forefront and assess labor market performance by focusing on workers' well-being. So the approach builds on the fact that job quality matters both for social but also economic reasons. Job quality represents a key determinant of individual well-being. As you know, people spend a lot of time at work and they work for a significant part of their life. In that sense, improving job quality represents an end in itself. However, job quality also determines labor force participation, commitment, and ultimately, therefore, also productivity. So it's a means to greater economic performance. As highlighted in my previous slide, many efforts have been developed, like we saw the statistical framework. However, one major obstacle to foster concrete policy actions on job quality has been the challenge of really defining and measuring it due to the multidimensional nature of job quality, but also the difficulty of getting comparable job quality indicators, comparable over time across country and groups. So the OECD framework is trying really to address this by developing an operational framework, something take a pragmatic approach, try to put well-being at its core, but not be comprehensive and assess all possible existing dimensions. So what makes a quality job? The first step is to define the dimension and the scope. The dimensions have been selected as the one absolutely critical and essential to workers' well-being. So we use the literature on well-being, the Stiglitz and Fitoussi report, of course, but also the well-being framework developed by the OECD, and we identified 3 complementary key dimensions. First of all, earnings quality. Earnings quality refers to the job contribution to the material living conditions of workers and their family. Then labor market security, or insecurity if you want, which relates to the risk workers face in the labor market and to their consequences. And I will detail a little bit in my presentation. For OECD country, obviously the major risk is the risk of unemployment. For emerging economies, non-OECD countries, the major risk is the risk of falling into extreme low pay. And thirdly, the third dimension is the quality of the working environment, which captures all those non-economic aspects of the job quality, for instance, the nature and the content of the work performed, so the working time aspects, working condition, workplace relationship, etc. Very quickly, this chart is displaying the OECD new framework. So it flags, you can see the importance of job quality when assessing labor market performance, as important as job quantity, with overall the main overarching goal being the well-being of people. Finally, about the indicators. Well, in order to ensure that the chosen indicators are meaningful and policy relevant, 3 general principles have been followed to guide the measurement of job quality along each of those dimensions. The first one is to focus on outcomes. That is, outcomes rather than drivers. For instance, to assess job security, we don't look at the protection provided by employment protection legislation, but we really look at the resulting security that workers enjoy. Second principle is to use microdata and evaluate the situation of individual workers. This is very important because it allows us to precisely go beyond simple average, look at distribution effects. And third principle is to favor objective features, objective indicators of job quality, favors but not exclude, therefore, self-reported indicators. And this is important in order to ensure better comparability of outcomes across country and time. So let me take you quickly along a sort of statistical portrait along each of those dimensions. So to start with, earnings quality. So earnings quality, we constructed an overall index of earnings quality that takes account of both average earning and distribution across the workforce. And here you can see that the results show that earnings quality measured that way is highest, I don't know if you can see, in the Nordic countries, so typically Denmark, Norway, but also in Switzerland. And at the other side of the chart, well, we have the Latin American countries, so Mexico, Brazil, and Chile. Looking at the second dimension, which is labor market insecurity, here I don't want to spend time explaining how we measure it, but in a nutshell, just to flag the fact that we also wanted to look not only, the idea was to capture the cost of being unemployed, but also of staying unemployed, but overall also at the cost of this. And because of that, we looked not only at the risk of unemployment, but also on the other hand, at the insurance provided to compensate for this effect of being unemployed. And here, again, the country ranking. I have to flag here the fact that this data are for 2010, so of course you can see the effect of the crisis, but the data suggests that labor market insecurity is highest in countries such as Spain, Greece, and Estonia. Of course, countries where unemployment increased sharply as a result of the crisis are those ones. But on the other hand, on the other side of the chart, you have countries, again, Nordic countries, Norway, Switzerland, but also to some extent the Netherlands, which display the lowest insecurity. Going to the third dimension, which is the most innovative one in the framework, and which relates to the quality of the working environment. So here we draw on the literature from occupation and health, which suggests that what matters for well-being outcomes and health in particular, is really the balance between the demands that work impose on workers and tend, of course, to impair the health of people, and the job resources they have at their disposal to sort of compensate for these demands. So we used, in order to assess this, the percentage, the share of workers that experience job strain, where job strain are defined, as I was saying, as jobs where workers face more job demands, time pressure, physical health risk, than job resources. And typically, we took, due to data availability, as job resources, work autonomy, learning possibility, and also access to training, but also the fact of having good relationship with colleagues and having also feedback from the managers. Here again, a portrait along that third dimension. So here, results suggest that Turkey, Greece, Poland, for instance, are really characterized by high level of job strain. Whereas, on the other hand, some countries tend to do much better, Ireland, New Zealand, or the Netherlands. Maybe you cannot see because it's small, but we also have Mexico displayed here, and it's actually stands in the middle of the range, and actually the share of strained workers in Mexico is almost at the OECD average. Looking at the workers, so which workers actually enjoy good or bad quality jobs, well, we looked at the distribution by age, gender, and education, and not surprisingly what we found is that young people, so the youth, the low-skilled and low-educated were typically those likely to get the lowest job quality. This, of course, results on average. Now, I would just like to spend the last 5 minutes of my time to show you how we adjusted this framework, which originally was developed for OECD countries, to a broader range of countries, emerging economies, to take into account the most salient features of the labor market of those economies. Weak social protection, high incidence of informality, also high rates of in-work poverty, etc. And also how to cope with the fact that data are much more limited also in some of those countries. The idea was really to keep the same framework, the same building blocks, and the same principle, and extend the framework to those economies. To start with, quickly, earnings quality, well, basically we kept the same index. So the only thing that I would like to show here on that slide is basically that we have a broader country coverage, so we have now more emerging economies. And what you can see here is that earnings quality shows considerable variation across emerging economies. That overall earnings quality is much lower than the OECD average, which is plotted on the right. And most importantly, earnings quality is characterized by a combination of very low average earnings, but also very high earnings inequality in these countries. Moving to the second dimension, so labor market insecurity. As I told you in my introduction, we realized very quickly that the risk of unemployment obviously is probably not the best way to capture labor market insecurity in India, for instance, where unemployment is not a meaningful indicator. So what we did, we enriched the framework with a complementary measure, which is the risk of falling into extreme low pay, and which corresponds basically to a disposable per capita income of $2 per day in a typical household family with one single earner. And here, what you have here is a combination of the two risks. So the risk of unemployment and the risk of falling into extreme low pay. And here you can see that labor market insecurity exceeds the OECD average in these economies. Of course, insecurity from unemployment is generally low, but the point is really that insecurity for extreme low pay tends to really drive the overall labor market insecurity, except for South Africa, where unemployment levels are also extremely high, and the risk of unemployment, therefore, also very high. Finally, third dimension, the quality of the working environment. So here we had also to make an adjustment for two reasons. First one was that in those economies, there is a high percentage of self-employed people. So in order to better capture the quality of the working environment, but also due to data limitation, we had to use a proxy to measure the quality of the working environment. And we looked at the incidence of people working very long hours, so over 60 hours a week. And here you can see that the shares for emerging economy is quite high, much higher in OECD countries. Finally, we also looked again at the quality by socio-demographic groups, and those were the same. The worst off were again the youth and the low-skilled workers. Now, what may be more interesting here is that we compare formal and informal workers. We had the possibility to do this along again the three dimensions. And what we found is that informal workers tend to earn less, to face considerably higher labor market insecurities. This is particularly strong in the panel displayed here, and also they work long hours much more often. In addition, and this is not displayed here, we also looked at the transition of informal workers, whether they had the possibility to move out of those informal jobs and possibly move to formal jobs, have some stepping stone effects, etc. And the panel analysis we conducted is not very optimistic, was showing there are sometimes very few stepping stone effects, but in general, informal workers tend to be stuck in informal jobs, or when they move to formal jobs, sometimes this is to go to a precarious jobs, and then after one step in the formal atypical jobs, they go back to informality. So to conclude, informal jobs offer lower job quality, but also they rarely lead to better employment opportunity. They tend to leave scars on people, and again, particularly for some categories, in particular low-skilled people. I'm done. This is my last slide. Concluding remarks, so you can read the two things I just want to flag is basically that the OECD is engaging further on this job quality initiative. We've been on the statistical front, we've been developing a database on job quality, which display the results along the three dimensions I have presented to you. And the other sort of strand of work we are going on is to investigate further the dynamic approach, how the workers, the dynamic and the career they can have in their life. And I stop here and I thank you.
Thank you, Sandrine, for this enlightening presentation. I pass the floor to Sang-Kyun Lee.
Hello? Okay. Good afternoon. I just about to say good morning, but I just realized it's already past 12, so I have to say good afternoon. What I'm going to do today is that just following Sandrine's presentation on the job quality assessment framework, and also there are some other complementary job evaluation framework, like the ILO's, the district indicator, or others. So I think we have relatively clear idea about what are the critical dimensions of job quality if we are really keen, if we are really concerned about this. Then the next question for us is what then government or the public authorities can do in improving the job quality. That's the focus of my presentation. And as you know, I'm very much actually concerned about the well-being of the participants in this room. So I decided to start with the conclusion. I'm going to give my overall concluding kind of messages in terms of the takeaway messages. And the starting point is that I think if we really trying to align the growth and or other economic performance and the job quality and well-being, it is essential to have very good policy interventions. We know because the growth or at the enterprise level profitability is an important element. That's very important, actually necessary condition. But it does not necessarily lead to the better job quality. We hear this kind of story all the time, actually, throughout this conference. Second is what we know is these linkages between growth or the economic performance or the profitability on the one hand, and the job quality, that linkages can be strengthened through good policies. One of the good pieces of news here is that when we're talking about policies, you immediately think of the labor regulation. So there has been a lot of debate on this. But recently, actually, we are a bit shifting away from the more simplistic or the diagnostic actually approach to labor regulation, which is actually paints a bit negative picture of the labor regulation. But recently, as you know very well, there has been a growing evidence which basically indicate labor regulation does not have the harmful impact on the labor market and economic growth. But it all depends. And at the same time, the causality can run in the opposite direction. This is something we have heard from this conference again and again. First, for example, if we have a better job quality, we can expect a very positive impact on labor supply side, particularly on labor productivities. Happier workers and better well-being leads to the more motivated and will increase the productivities. At the same time, this is hinted by the speech by Stiglitz this morning. This actual job quality dimension has also strong demand effects. If you have the better income, better wages, and better social protection, this can enhance the consumption power for the household, average household, especially for low-income families. This would trigger some good kind of positive linkage from the increased consumption and increased investment, and altogether, we can expect a better economic performance. Then, all these messages are really good. I mean, so if we can do something on the job quality, we'll have all good result. But the question mark here is, do we need a good policy in place? So everybody agrees job quality is important and productive, and in the end, everybody will benefit from it. Then why is it so difficult to have a good policies in place? That's my question in my presentation. I think it's a very tricky question, but I try to put out the three actual points. First of all, is still there are still fundamental challenges of the collective actions. For example, enterprises are in different conditions, different circumstances, and workers have also similar circumstances. So the regulation is not imposing something on employers or the workers. What is the regulation all about is how to create a favorable incentive structure for enterprises to improve the job quality, which will eventually lead to better productivity and better well-being for workers. This is not very easy issues. As we know, sometimes the policies are not very well designed, sometimes to punish it rather than encourage or compensate the enterprise with a very good initiative, which might lead to the better job quality at their workplaces. In this respect, I highlighted two important points. The good policies, the term the good policy is not just about the regulation. What I'm going to highlight today is the level is important, but at the same time, the coverage and also compliance is really, really important. The importance of these two matters are particularly great in the different countries. So in this way, we can probably shift away from another simplistic debate on the labor regulation or labor policies. And in doing so, I just want to stress the one important factor here is that the policy design in taking into account this level and compliance and also the coverage is critical. That should be informed by reliable analysis. Oftentimes, we talk about the impact of the labor regulation or the policies on the job qualities, but at the end of the day, it's very important to understand exactly what happens in the critical two dimensions, which is the coverage and compliance. So this is my overall take-home message. So from now on, I'm going to illustrate some of the messages with some of the concrete examples. For example, already the OECD introduced a job quality evaluation framework, and also the ILO a long time ago already established what we call the decision work indicators, which are looking at different dimensions of the job quality, which is quite extensive. It's more extensive than actually the OECD job quality framework. What is distinct part of this actual ILO, the decision work indicator, is we introduce policy indicators. We call it legal framework indicators. So we're looking at the policy measures on the, for example, minimum wages and working time and annual leave, and also the unemployment benefit, and also the benefit relating to the injury. And at the same time, we're very much highlighting the importance of social dialogue, because at the end of the day, as actually the Stiglitz actually highlighted this morning, at the end of the day, what this indicator will do, of course, it's very useful for monitoring, but another very important piece of the story is that we put these indicators and provide some grounds for informed the social dialogue and policy development. So the indicator matters in that respect greatly. So when we actually talk about this actually, I think what kind of policies we're looking at, I think we need to have a bit of the triangular approach or simultaneous approach to the three dimensions of the labor regulation. One is about the level, for example, unemployment benefit, that's important. But at the same time, we have to understand how many workers are basically covered by this actually unemployment benefit. So sometimes debates are focusing on the level of unemployment benefit. Is it 30%? Replacement rate should be 30% or 40%? Is it too much or not? But that's important, but we have to look at the coverage as well. And also, especially in the context of emerging countries, we have to look at the compliance. This is particularly a very weak area of the data collection at the moment. We have beautiful policies on paper, and we have a good coverage, but at the end of the day, it's not implemented at the workplace. So very few workers can benefit from that. That's not kind of situation we want to be in. So whenever we are looking at the job quality indicators, we want to organize the social dialogue and policy debate. We have to look at all these three dimensions all together. So I just want to show a couple of the example on this. So for example, on employment protection law, you might be tired of hearing about the debate of this. Last almost 15 years or so, we have a very intense debate on the employment protection law. Now the empirical evidence shows, the impact of labor employment protection law on the employment is rather mixed, and sometimes it's not very negative. Sometimes it could be positive as well. But the point I want to raise here is the coverage of employment protection varies significantly across countries. As this graph actually shows, many countries, particularly in emerging countries, less than 60% of employees are covered by employment protection law. In some countries, it's less than 30%. So even though you do something on the level of the employment protection itself, but if you don't do anything on the coverage, then probably net benefit for workers may be a bit questionable. Another example is the minimum wages. Again, this is the area there has been a lot of debate on this, and what should be the optimal level of minimum wages. In my country, minimum wages are a bit way too high or way too low, and et cetera, et cetera. That's a very important point. But having said that, we have to look at how this employment the minimum wages are basically implemented for workers. This, again, you can see huge variation across countries. Of course, some countries, for example, Vietnam, actually, minimum wages are a bit low, but the actual implementation rate is quite high. And then, but when it comes to India, it's the compliance rate is about the 30%. And other countries like the Philippines, South Africa, where minimum wages are relatively high by international comparison, but the compliance rate is less than 50%. So if we put together all this, level and the coverage and the compliance, we may have a more nuanced picture about the labor regulation overall. But the one more point I want to make on the job quality is that there are, as I indicated, there are very strong cases for the improving job quality. If you do something on the job quality, the benefit really is quite strong in terms of the productivity and profitability. Just one example, which is launched by a long time ago, which some of you already familiar with. This is the ILO IFC, World Bank IFC joint program. And then there has been a variety of the intervention programs in the garment industry. This is the attempts to improve the working conditions with strong collaborations between managers and workers, and also somehow creating, this is a very important point, creating the sense of the ownership and responsibility for continuously improving working conditions. And for example, the safety and health has been big issues in the garment industry around the world. And we know in our estimate about the economic cost relating to the occupation safety and health is around 4% of global GDP. That's our estimate. There's certainly economic cost relating to safety and health issues. So we encourage the companies to integrate this potential cost into their decision on the job quality related policies. Recently, we have very extensive empirical analysis. The evidence is very conclusive. First of all, better working conditions definitely leads to workers' productivity. The mechanism is broad. It's motivational effects, and sometimes it reduces the safety and health risk, and et cetera, et cetera. And also in response to that, the one idea might be we see the productivity increases thanks to all these good interventions, then probably the factories might be a bit actually encouraged to cut the cost further in response to that. So that's another kind of the enterprise dynamic, but we don't see any evidence on this. And also which basically meaning the factories remain engaged in improving the human capital, investing more in the skills and etc. And also with all of this, we found very strong evidence that the profitability of the factories has improved quite significantly. So this is a good case for the policy intervention at the country level with a strong coordination with the government and the public authorities through the very strong labor inspection program. So we have a very strong economic case for improving job quality. But I'm going to conclude my intervention with a bit of giving a bit of the nuance to this approach. These all look good, but it critically depends on how you design your policies. I'm going to, again, take examples from Vietnam. For example, in emerging countries, one of the hot agenda is the formalization, how to make swift and sweet transition from informal to formal employment. That is a big issue. And one of the important dimensions of formality is the social security coverage. So especially this is a challenge in SMEs. So what we are looking at is the SMEs in Vietnam using the enterprise data and to see what will be impact of this formalization on the overall turnout or the revenue of the enterprises and at the same time the profitabilities. The evidence is very clear. Indeed, the formalization actually leads to the better performance at the enterprises. But that's the average overall story. But if you look at it more careful, there is a more nuanced story coming out, which is like this. So for example, we know the productivity effect of the better job quality it could be short-term and instant, but in many cases, mid-term and long-term. So productivity effects may come out a bit later, gradually, and stronger, but not initial stages. but the cost actually borne by the enterprises in the process of formalization may be immediate and spontaneous and short term. So there is a bit of mismatch between the cost and also the benefit. So our actual research phase indicate that indeed in the first phases, the first 1 or 2 years or so, the company may have the net cost relating to the formalization. But the 3 or 4 years later, definitely net actual benefits actually exceed any benefit in there. So it has a very strong policy implication. When you design the policies encourage the formalization in SMEs in Vietnam, probably one best way of doing this is the introducing incentive system or subsidy schemes which have to be phased out over years, like 3 or 4 years. How long that should be in terms of the phasing out the period, you really have to look at the evidence. So what I'm trying to say here is that when we design the policy, it's very important to take into account how enterprises dynamic will play out. And so to create the best possible incentive structures for enterprises in which actually we can basically compensate actually good intended enterprises with a good initiative and with a good policy support. So I'll stop here. Probably after this, we'll hear lots of the stories from about the enterprise dynamics. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sang-Hyun. And as he mentioned at the very end of his presentation, we have had this introduction to the general framework that Sandrine gave us on job quality. Then we have seen how this is in place and how it's being implemented at the policy level with some success stories, some other examples. And of course, this underlines that to have the metrics and to have the measure enables policymakers to go ahead with different policies in terms of alleviating our situations where we want to enhance the quality of jobs. Now we are turning to, especially to how private sector really reacts and helps this process, and also what are the different tools that we can also extract from the measurement to have new dimensions to add to the quality of jobs. So now the second part of the presentations will be dealing precisely with this, how enterprises, how corporate social responsibility addresses these issues, how this process of labor productivity is being, it's been enhanced by obviously increase the happiness in the workplace, which is something that it affects well-being at the personal level. So now I will turn to Kel.
Okay.
To help us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having the opportunity to tell you about what we are planning to do in the bank, or what we're working with in the bank. So basically, this is a working case study. It's all about how we have created a program about Bank in Motion. Just to put us on the map, we are from the Nordic region, Denmark, 5 million residents. The bank that I'm working for has 400 employees and approximately 150,000 customers. It's a full service bank. That means that we both have business and private consumers. Looking back at why we started all this up, we have to go back to 2009. We had the recession. We had a bank that didn't earn any money. Actually, the surplus was zero. So the board decided that we should have a new CEO, we should have a new vision, we should have a new mission, and we should also have a new strategy. The strategy was that we had to earn some more money, we had to be on the map, and while planning this, we could see that we had to have our employees to work much harder. They had to accomplish harder goals. And we were talking about, if we just go on with this plan, we will probably get a lot of people who will get stressed and sick by going to work. And that is not going to happen, because one of the goals from the board was that we should increase the well-being while we were increasing the surplus. So that's why we started the program called Bank in Motion. We wanted our people to increase their well-being while they still were increasing the surplus for the bank. So basically what we thought of was that happy people makes other people happy, and happy people makes good solutions together. So that was the base point for starting up with the program. Another thing that we worked with was we believe that if you have physical good health, if you have a good fitness, then you can overcome a lot more. And you will always be able to cope with the things that you are standing above. So that was the two main things that we would work with. So we put up these goals for the program. We had to increase the productivity, we had to increase the efficiency by our employees. To start up, just for giving an example, we wanted them to have 2 meetings every day with a customer. When we started up, they had 0.6 meetings every day with a customer. We also wanted to increase the well-being and the job satisfaction, and we wanted to have people on work. We wanted to have a low absenteeism, and to look at how do we reduce the days away from the work. And then we set up some goals for the fitness, BMI, physical fitness, and basically we wanted to make sure that our people was mentally robust and physically ready to take it. The goal from the board was that we should be among the 25 best companies in Denmark when we went out of the strategy period. What to do? We said that we wanted support at all management levels. We wanted the leaders to be the ambassadors for the program. We wanted the employees to know what was going on. It should be totally transparent. Everybody should know why we did this and what it was all about. We decided that it should be a part of the business, so we didn't want to put it in the project management organization, neither in the working environment organization. We wanted to be in the human resource department and see it as an investment. One thing that was very good for this program was that it was anchored at the board and at the CEO, and that it was a part of the business strategy. So everybody was driving this forward, and also the board wanted to have status because it was a part of the strategic goals. So when we work with this, we work with all levels. We work with the individual level, with the group level, with the management level, and the organizational level, and we put goals all over. For instance, we said that every leader in the bank should be able to make lifestyle coaching. Every leader in the bank is certified as coach, and then we put on a module where they learned how to deal with lifestyle problems, how to coach on that. We developed some team tools, I'll show you one of them, and then we implemented an annual health check for everybody in the bank. We also did a survey alongside the health check and then could use the data together to see what could we do about it. We started up some programs. We don't believe in needle stick operations. We don't believe if you have a mindfulness instructor to come for an hour and tell you how to be mindful, I don't think anybody will be mindful by that. So if we do something, we do it all in. The lose and win sequence, which is on the map here, it's a 4-month program where you meet with the specialist once a week. Every Wednesday, it could be a chef and a fitness instructor or a dietist or so on that helps people losing weight. So we want people to energize. We want people to be able to be something at the work. We want them to come into the job with their hands above their head, ready to go. And when they go home, we also want them to have the hands above their head so they can be something in the local community, something for the family, and work the whole way around. So here we have one of the models, one of the things that we use at the group level. This is basically very simple. It's after the survey, we look at how are the questions coming out, and we take the questions that we think we should work a little bit more with. We create 20 cardboards with the questions on, and we send it out to the departments. We have instructed the leaders to facilitate this workshop around the questions. All the people in the department look at the 20 cardboards. They decide what 5 to work with, put it on this well-being compass, and as you can see, there's a little green dot. The little green dot indicates where are we today, and then they shall also put in a red dot, where do we want to be? And if there is a gap, you have to work out a plan that is aligned, a plan where there's a leader on, someone who is responsible, a time plan, and so on. And then we will work with a problem in the department, so everybody could be well-being around that. One other thing that we have developed is taking it from the physical part also to the mental part. We want people to be well-being. So after the health check, you can apply to go to this course. And then you have to work out an energy log. What makes me happy when I go to work? What motivates me? What demotivates me? And you have to look at it in a 14 days period, and then you come to the first day. And there you will work with what can I be good at? What is motivating me? What do I need to be better at? And we're working out of a context where we think that what you're good at can you become 200% better at. What you're bad at can you only become 50% better at. So why not focus on what you're good at and then go home to your leader with a plan of, I need to do more of this and less of this. It will give much better productivity and efficiency. Afterwards, we also again look at a 14 days period. A 14 days period where we ask the participant to look at how is my life? What motivates me? What makes me happy? What are my happy moments? What do I want to achieve? What is the vision about my life? And then on the second day, we work with that. So you come out again with a plan. Perhaps you have to go home to your family and call them in for a workshop to talk about what are the goals for our family, what are the vision for our family. So we help people take care of themselves. We help people to take responsibility in their own life. And at the end, we have one of our sessions with our business psychologist to capture up on the plans that there has been made. So this is what we are doing every year. Since 2009, we just go around this map. We collect data, we work with them, we implement them, we see if they work. If they don't work, we have to make them a little better, and then we take in data again. And talking about data, what are the results of this investment? As I said to you, in 2008, we didn't earn any money. You can see that it has gone rapidly up. 140 million Danish crowns is the surplus in 2014. The self-rated productivity is going up. The number of annual sick days per employee is going down. When we started, we had 8 days in average. Now we have 4 days in average. And that includes also when you're away with a broken leg or other long-time sickness. Percentage of habit changes. You can see a lot of people now exercises. And what about the customer satisfaction? We're number 3 in Denmark now. And what about the great place to work? I told you we should be among the 25 best companies in Denmark. When we started out, we were number 69. After a year with this program, we became number 71. Well, that was in the wrong direction. So after another year, we were 24, and now we are number 20. And looking at the employee satisfaction is quite high. 93% is satisfied or very satisfied with their work in the bank. So something is working here. This was a short introduction to the program where we have been working with the well-being of our employees. We have looked at it as an investment. We have looked at it as we want to increase the efficiency, we want to be more productive, we have to earn some money, and on the same time we have to have employees who is well-being, who is very satisfied and very happy about what they are doing. And as you can see, it has been recognized around the world. We have won the Danish Environment Prize We have won the European Union's prize for occupational safety and health, especially looking at handling the psychosocial dimension and the stress dimension that I haven't been talking so much about. And then finally in the spring, we won the Global Health Award. Thank you very much.
Well, Kjell, thank you very much for your refreshing presentation. I wonder if the bank needs statisticians.
We can look at it.
Well, we will now turn to Oriana.
I must say, it's very exciting to hear what you've been doing, because it really sounds as if we might have been working together with the things that you're looking at and the way you're concentrating your efforts. So, very interesting. And I hope that you also find some parallels with what we're doing. Would this really look like a picture of a happy holiday to you? And it might be, to be sitting on the beach. Is that job quality, when you can take your computer on holiday and you can be keeping up with what's going on in the office? Or is it actually just the worst holiday in the world? And the way that we're looking at job quality, I think, has had to change recently, because it's become so all-encompassing. It's very hard to leave behind your computer or your phone. And so the job demands and job quality is actually encroaching more and more onto our private lives and onto what we do when we're not at work. So it's very hard to leave it all behind. So, as with any research project that is taken up independently, it has to come from something. And for me and for the people that we work with, it came from actually being quite unhappy ourselves at work. So we decided to research it and see what would happen and what it was that was making people either happy or unhappy at work. And it's been a long process. We've been researching now for about 8 years. We started out with 14 focus groups. We then did some interviews. We've done numerous studies. We presented our first results at the Positive Psychology Association in 2009. So we have now, and we've now got the validity and reliability, because in fact this morning they confirmed to me we've now got 49,000 respondents to the questionnaire that we have devised around the subject of happiness at work. And in fact I take advantage now to say that anybody who gives me their card at the end of the presentation who would be interested in taking the survey, give me your card and I'll be delighted to set you up in the system so that you can try the questionnaire and see how happy you are at work right now. The work that we do is at all levels of seniority in companies. And in fact, recently I was working with a company and the managing director and the receptionist had exactly the same happiness rating, which for the managing director was a total shock. He just could not believe that this was possible. But because it's about job satisfaction, because it's about having a sense of purpose at work, because it's about feeling contribution, it's perfectly possible for the top person in the company and for one of the most low-level people in the company to actually have very similar, if not identical, levels of happiness at work. And that's something that we do see on a regular basis. And as a coach, what I often see is that the people at the top are actually much unhappier than the people who are lower down in the company. We've now been researching in 68 countries, so we've got a good cultural crosscut, and we can see that there are some tendencies, but it does remain pretty similar in terms of happiness at work from country to country. So what we want to do is, we all know that we get measured at work all the time. There are ways of measuring what we do, how we do it, how well we do it. And so with all this information, we wanted to look at it in a different way. So to look at it through the lens of well-being or happiness is a very different way of analysing the information that does come out from the surveys that get done at work on job engagement, job satisfaction. But adding the lens of happiness gives us a whole different set of data to be working with. And what we want to do with this, and this very much is part of your point, is make HR very deeply strategic within company policy and company planning. Because when they integrate, when happiness at work is integrated into the business vision, into the strategy, into the long-term planning, then HR have a role which becomes more important every day and is most definitely more and more strategic. What we like to do is to focus on what's working whilst we improve what's not working, and that's where the positive psychology approach comes in. And so one of the first things that we will always be doing is looking at what is working in this company and how can we use what is working to make what isn't working better. We want to get buy-in at every level, which is another thing that you mentioned. And so in a company, everybody who takes the survey, answers the questionnaire, gets their own report, which tells them what their individual level of happiness is. It's about a 10-page report, and so within that report there are suggestions for what they can do on an individual level to make their level, to bring up their levels of happiness through their own effort. And that is actually key to what we do, because the organisation has a responsibility towards employees, but our belief and what our research has shown us is that actually it is also the individual's responsibility to work at creating their own happiness at work. And that also is part of fostering employee ownership of the strategies that come in. I'm sure that you've all seen many strategies being introduced in organisations which are about well-being, and they're short-lived, mainly because there isn't buy-in at every level, and because people just think, oh, this is yet another way of trying to get more out of me, making me stay longer at work. And we don't believe that. We believe that if people actually buy in and want to be part of creating greater well-being in the workplace, then there is a good result. And so what we do is we try to indicate what can improve on a very practical level. The suggestions that we'll make as consultants will always be practical and always be things that can be enacted by individuals, by teams, or at an organisational level. And in order to be able to do that, we need to offer a tailored approach. And for that, we listen to our customers and find out what it is that they want to be doing. And one example of this, it was in a construction company where they wanted to bring down levels of accidents in the workplace. That was the key indicator for them that the well-being would have improved. And the accidents came down 45% within the first 3 months of us working with them, for a very simple reason. What came out in the survey was that people felt that they weren't ever listened to, and if they said anything that could be unpopular, then they might get fired for it. And so when that particular thing was changed in this company, people could say when they thought that something was dangerous, and that was enough to bring down the level of accidents to well, it wasn't really an acceptable level, but it certainly was a good start in making it a safer place to work. So we define happiness at work as a mindset. It's a way of thinking which allows people to maximize performance and achieve potential. And that's important because defining happiness in any sense of the word is always hard. And defining happiness at work, for many people, is actually an oxymoron. So this is how we define it, and this is how we work with it. And this is the model. We have, at the center of the model, achieving your potential, which I think is key to everything else that we're going to talk about. We have contribution, which is how much do I contribute to the company and how much does the company contribute to me. My conviction, which is about short-term motivation. We also look into the culture. How well does somebody fit into the company culture? How comfortable do they feel at work? We have commitment, which is long-term engagement, and confidence, which is my own my self-confidence, and how is that boosted while I'm at work. That's the inside of the circle. And all those things are interconnected. As you can see, we've got them linked up, each one with the other. Around the outside of the circle, we have the subject of trust. Because if I can't trust my company, or I don't trust the vision of my leaders, then being happy at work is really very, very hard. People also need to get recognition, positive recognition, on a regular basis. Interestingly, investigation shows that getting positive recognition is the best, getting negative recognition is second best, but getting no attention whatsoever is actually the most impactful thing that can happen to somebody at work. So if you're being ignored at work, your levels of happiness chances will be extremely low. Getting the good recognition, getting positive recognition is best. And people need to feel proud of what they're doing. You need to have a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. What is it that gets me up in the morning and means that I actually want to go to work? If I'm proud of what I do, then the chances are that I will also be happy at work. And so that's a way of describing what we do. And then what's important is the business case, of course. So what we do is we look and we compare the people the least happy at work, the people who are relatively unhappy at work, averagely happy, relatively happy, and happiest. And we do that on a series of measures, and I'll just go through a couple of them with you. The intention to quit. The unhappiest people at the moment intend to stay in their job for about 18 months, and the happiest people, the top of our scale is 60 months, so 5 years, and the happiest people say that they have no intention to quit. The number of months that people were staying, when we were in the middle of the recession, people were saying that they were going to stay at least 24 months. The most unhappy people were saying they were going to stay at least 24 months in their jobs, but now the numbers have come down and we're at about 18 months. Sick leave, this is something that you also mentioned. The happiest people take less than 1 day of sick leave a year on average, and the unhappiest take 7. So what you can start to see is that actually it's very expensive to have unhappy people at work, because someone who's unhappy and takes a lot of sick leave represents a cost to the company. And focus on task. The happiest people say that they're focused on task 80% of their time, pretty much. And the unhappiest people say that they're focused on time 40% of the time. They're focused on task 40% of the time, which translates to people working either 4 days a week or 2 days a week. So productivity is very much linked to happiness. And the amount of energy, how energized do people feel while they're at work? The happiest people feel energized about 80% of the time, and the less happy people around 12% of the time. And I'm sure that you've all worked with people who come in and they have that black cloud over their head, and they're complaining about everything, and those are the people who have a great impact on the workplace, because their levels of energy affect everybody else. And it has a knock-on effect and brings down the happiness levels of the people who are have the greatest well-being in the workplace. And the happiest employees, none of this is rocket science, but these are the things that come out from the research. The happiest employees are more helpful, they're more creative, innovative, they get on better, they've got friends at work, they're more resilient, they achieve their potential more, they're more connected. And for me, one of the most interesting things here is that the greater belief that they're doing something worthwhile. Being able to find that belief that I'm doing something worthwhile is very, very important. And these are not the standard measures that come out of most company evaluations, because we're looking, as I was saying, through the lens of happiness at work. And this goes far beyond engagement, for instance, because we're looking at so many different elements. And we are actually measuring around 57 elements whenever anybody answers the questionnaire, to see what it is that makes them either happy or unhappy at work. And so what does it look like? When we work with a company, this is the way that we present the data. And I've taken culture as the feeling of fit at work as the example to show you. So that divides down into whether you love your job, you like your colleagues, you appreciate the organizational values, you feel that you work in a fair culture, and you have control over your activities. We then divide up the company either by area or by whatever it is that the people want to be measuring. So it could be people under 30, or it could be male and female. It could be the people who've been working in the company for 5 years, or the people in the company who've been working here for 20 years. But we can divide it all up, and we can see where we have the red traffic lights, which, for instance, in this company, in the warehouse, there's a big problem. And so to come back to what I was talking about, saying that making HR deeply strategic, we give this report to somebody in HR and they go, okay. So in the warehouse, people don't love their jobs, they don't appreciate the organizational values, they feel it's not fair, and they have zero control over their daily activities, which then gives you the place to start to change this and to make the difference so that the people in this instance in the warehouse can be happier and can at the same time get to increase levels of productivity. Because if in a warehouse people are only focused on task for 40% of the time, then really there's a problem in the company. Same for trust, pride and recognition. In this particular company, in the warehouse, there's a problem in logistics as well and in marketing. But this kind of information presented like this allows human resources to be extremely strategic and to work targeting very specific areas and within the organization. So that's my presentation. There's my email in case you don't have a card and you do want to take the questionnaire yourself. And anybody who does want to take the questionnaire, please give me your card and I'll set you up on the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Oriana. I think it's also a very interesting presentation that concludes our panel, but I think triggers a lot of questions and comments from the floor, which I think we have some minutes to allocate for that. And I guess that we had a very, I would say, diverse type of presentations, and ranging from the macro level, the statistical framework, to the very concrete aspects on how companies and consultancies, firms addresses the topic of the core issues of quality of jobs, namely happiness and how this is linked with productivity, which is clear from the presentations that has a clear link. So the floor is open for comments, discussions. We have here, there.
Hi, Tommy Hutchinson from the Global Center for Healthy Workplaces. I really liked all the presentations, they were superb. And particularly the last presentation on the slide about holiday, the person on the beach with the laptop. We're seeing increasingly a trend, particularly in Asia and perhaps in the Americas, of people working, virtually almost getting no holiday, maybe 1 week, maybe 2 weeks holiday. Whereas in Europe, we still have a degree of 20, 30 days. And I'm just wondering, is there evidence to show that lack of holiday is actually affecting productivity? Is there any evidence about that? And in terms of flexibility of work, not quite holiday, Carlos Slim has advocated recently, or about a year ago, that everyone should work 3 days a week and work 11 hours a day, and then have the other 2 days off. And he believed that that would improve productivity. So I just would really like to ask the panel about their views on should we actually have more holiday time, and would that improve productivity?
I think that if we have some members of the panel who would like to react.
I personally don't have, my own research doesn't come up with any of that. I have read research about it. I can't remember the names of the researchers right now, but I will try and remember, and if you give me your card, I will get back to you.
Thank you.
And back in the practical world, in Denmark, in the financial sector, we actually have 7 weeks holiday a year. And the employees can't use it all. They get stressed if I tell them that they should use all their vacation. So I think there is a tipping point where you can get too much vacation in order to accomplish your goals.
Okay. Maybe.
Another question here.
Thank you. Okay. You can hear me? Okay. Well, my name is Heriberto Valdez. I work here in Guadalajara. I've been working with Wilmar Schaufeli with work engagement. I've been working with Michael Later with Crew Initiative. And I've been working also, and I made the translation to Spanish for the document of healthy workplaces. So I recognize the efforts of the bank making a healthy workplace. And I also recognize that the well-being at work, it's a very crucial point. But now I've been looking that in our cultures, there's a value for the suffering at work. And I don't know, maybe someone here has seen that too. But when I talk about happiness at work, some kind of people tells me, oh, that's not possible because work means suffering. If you don't suffer, you're not working. So how can we deal with that cultural background? Because for me, it has been difficult to convince employers and employees that happiness it's a great value for productivity and for well-being. How can we deal with that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I do have an answer, and I agree with you that for many years I would go into people's offices and they'd say, happiness at work, ha, ha, ha. Of course, we'd love to talk to you about that. Could you come back in a month's time or in 6 months' time? Because work is serious and work is about getting down to things in the way that you ought to be working, and it's all about we should be doing this and we have to do that. However, there is research, and the research I'd point you towards is done by Sonia Lyubomirsky, who did a longitudinal study on what comes first, happiness or productivity. And the resounding answer is that happiness predicts productivity rather than anything else, which starts to make the business case for investing in the well-being of employees and creating a workplace which is a happy place.
Jordan?
You want?
Can I-
Sabrine?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. It was really interesting to hear what you were saying, that, and also to respond to this question that Sang-John posed. Why is it so difficult to have good policy, right? And I think one element is really to think about this business case. I mean, that business has really to be convinced that job quality is not, just for the purpose of saying that, yeah, it's good. So that is provide really the economic arguments why it is important, for instance, to have a stable relationship, that there is a plus in having a stable relationship between the employer and the employee, why it is important to have a good working condition, etc., why having a higher wage can lead to better also efficiency, outcome, etc. I mean, this really has to be, evidence has to be developed, provided, so it's not just, something that, yeah, it's good to care about job quality. Really make the case. And I think it's not only human resource that have to be convinced in the private sector, but also, I mean, the people who are really, the financial, the investors, etc. To me, that's really important. Two very quick points I would like to make regarding also the question, why is it so complicated, right? Why can't we make it happen? I think another thing is, of course, because potentially developing these public policies have a cost, so how about the fiscal space, right, to go into these things. But I think an important element also is to have the accurate assessment of job quality, have a nuance, really, assessment of it. For instance, when we talk about labor legislation, and you talk about employment protection legislation, Sang-John, I think it's really important not only to look indeed at the text, at the de jure legislation that is provided, but at the effective security and protection that workers get at the end of the day. Sometimes it may seem that, well, you're well protected, etc. But in practice, you can have also perverse effect on the same workers you are trying to protect with your legislation. So I think that's why it's so important to look at outcomes, right, in the framework we are developing, in order to have the accurate assessment of job quality. Thank you.
Okay. I think what I want to highlight relating to the two questions from the floor is that there is the economic term that we have a fundamental issue of the time inconsistency in many cases, because when you actually make some investment to improve the job quality, and in many cases, the service sector is a bit different story, but it's at least the manufacturing sector or traditional industry, sometimes the productivity effects comes very slowly. So partly because of the workers are not very convinced that the measure they just see now will continue. Because especially this situation is the matter of the kind of trust or confidence in the new measures are particularly low in the small enterprises in developing countries. And so also especially health-related questions, this all kind of the negative impact of the bad working conditions are normally coming very late. Like you are doing the very intensive work for 5 or 6 years, and then you realize you have the problems. And also the employers have the same tendency. They cannot see immediate benefit, and so they cannot see immediately any potential problem with the workers in terms of the health and the injury, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think of course, there is a lot of things for individual companies can do, but that actually sets a good examples. But at the end of the day, unless you have a very good policy environment, which actually kind of convince workers and employers, to convince them, we have the collective interest in this. It's not short-term interest, it's a long-term interest. And then at the end of the day, this is the kind of the good collaboration between enterprises and the public policies. For example, paid holiday, for example, it is very well known now. The impact of the paid holiday is basically mid-term. So especially workers in manufacturing sectors, when you are doing very hard work without any kind of the paid holiday for extended period of time, then the 1 year, 2 years is okay. But when you doing this at the same time over 5 years or 6 years, and then you will see the problem. So we can reverse the logic again. You may not see the immediate impact of the paid holidays on productivity right now because workers may not see it either. But this is more the midterm issues. So this is why actually governments sometimes intervene to put the policies. Okay, from now on, everybody will have 2 or 3 weeks actually paid holiday, rather than asking workers and employers to negotiate all of this, because sometimes it's very hard to get agreement at the workplace level. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think we don't have any other questions on the floor or interventions. There.
Hi, Robert Bradbury from Canada. I was wondering if there was any data around empowerment and how that affects well-being, happiness, job quality, productivity, and profitability.
What is it? Empowerment.
What is the question? Can you repeat the question?
Can you repeat this question?
We could not hear.
I was wondering if there was any data around empowerment and how that affects well-being, happiness, job quality, productivity, production, etc.
Empowerment. I don't know what is exactly what you have in mind when you say empowerment. And of course, as far as I can see, the empowerment, at least at the workplace, have many different dimensions. One is that, for example, let me talk about the safety and health at the workplace. Of course, it's good to have some good policy in place, but if you actually empower workers to be aware of the risk at the workplaces, and then also they're aware of the kind of their right to use the protective equipment. That makes big difference. For example, we actually did a bit of survey in Tanzania, Mozambique, and to see how actually the simply awareness of the occupational safety and health risk at the workplaces, that actually immediately kind of initiated some of the actions from workers, and that they call for some kind of or formal committee setting or more informal kind of the group to ask for the more protections at the workplace. So that actually creates a very important dynamic at the workplaces. Of course, I mean, if you do not have the problem there is that that's related to your question is if workers do not have any kind of power or right to talk to the employers on these issues, if they are not allowed to discuss this issue with employers, then actually the situation is getting worse and worse. It's very, very difficult. So one important starting point is to give the voice to workers and then raise the issues with the employers and to discuss them. In many cases, the solution is very constructive and also long-lasting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Rodrigo?
Thank you. This is a question for Sandrine Cassés. For a question from Sandrine. The question is, as I understand these indicators on job quality that OECD is working now in these indicators, are going to furnish as well house life publication. So I wonder why not amongst the dimensions, there is not a specific dimension that address balance between work and life and work balance, a specific dimension in that regard. Another question I want to make is, as far as I know, there was an European group that worked on job quality indicators that suggested about 7 dimensions. Their framework was approved by the European Statistical Conference, and OECD worked in that group. So I'm curious why OECD came up with another framework distinct from respect that other European group, or which is the relation between these two frameworks, or why is the reason to came up with another framework distinct from that one of the European group? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Actually, we work together, indeed, with UNEC. That's this group working on the quality of employment. And when you say OECD is part, is actually our team, indeed. And the point is really not to develop, indeed, another statistical framework and other indicators, etc. The idea is really to all go in the same direction. We work together also with the ILO and UNEC on this statistical framework. The main aspect we want to sort of push, I think, with our framework is to have less dimensions. There are absolutely no incompatibilities. I would even say they are mutually supportive, and flag 3 key dimensions in order to be operational. The UNEC statistical framework states that its ambition is to provide a statistical framework, full stop, not precisely to go with operational indicators, not to support any specific policy agenda, etc. So what we are explicitly trying to do here at the OECD in order to make things happen and have like really job quality at the policy forefront is to flag those 3 indicators. But we work very closely with all these statistical partners, with statistical agencies as well, and we have in particular contributed to the dimension related to work motivation and quality of the workplace, etc., with the UNEC statistical group. Your second question about if I understood correctly, was the link between the Better Life Index, How is Life indicators, and job quality framework. If that was the question, that's what I was trying to illustrate in one of the slides where I flagged the different dimensions. And the point here again is absolutely all goes in the same direction. What we do with the job quality indicators is that we deepen, we explore further those specific dimensions linked to if you want, how is life at the workplace, if I may speak so. So we are not adding a 12th component to the how is life agenda, which would be job quality. I mean, obviously, what I was trying to illustrate with the slide is to say that through earnings quality, that link very much with the income dimension of the well-being agenda, with working environment, but also then with labor market security. They all come across different dimensions. But they are absolutely fully consistent. The only thing is we go more in details into the job features and their contribution to the well-being of workers in our framework.
Well, thank you. I think we are coming to an end of this interesting panel, and we have many things to take away from these interventions. You will agree with me that they are very enlightening, and we could see how complex it is to work towards having better measurement of well-being at the workplace, and also in terms of job quality in general. And moreover, now we have the challenge for the SDGs, so I think we have a lot to think over and to incorporate this in the new framework that we are discussing as we speak. Thanks very much to all of you, and wish you the best in the continuation of the forum. Thanks very much.